one of the leading members espoused a doctrine I had never heard before. He said God only wanted to save some. It drove my anxiety like nothing else imaginable. From my perspective, it was the deepest valley of my struggle.
That was like so damaging because I was in such a vulnerable place. And then this guy, he comes along and just tells me, maybe you can't be saved.
Welcome to Provisionist Perspective, where we promote and defend God's love and provision for everyone. I'm your host, Drew, and today is a very special episode that I'm really excited about. My friend Bethany is on the show today to share about her autobiography. I read this book quite quickly, and it was a really interesting read to hear some of the insight behind her journey. I hope it's a blessing to you. And without further ado, I'm going to bring her on the stage, and you can say hi in the comments later on. Hey, Bethany, it's good to see you.
Oh, good.
So glad to have you on the show. I was all on your social media, just excited about this book for when it was going to release. And I got to admit, I heard that my wife and I were going to briefly feature in this book. So I did have a little bit of an interest in kind of like what that was going to be like. But I was genuinely interested in hearing your story. And it's really interesting just being someone that knows you personally and then getting to see some of the more behind the scenes. I'm not sure what kind of feedback you've gotten from friends and family on that, but it's been really interesting. And I was reading this book oftentimes next to Kirsty, like whether it was in bed or a coffee shop or something like that. And I just couldn't shut up. Like I kept turning to her and being like, wow, this is really interesting. Bethany said this about what happened. Do you remember when Bethany was really afraid of spiders and stuff? Like I forgot all about that. So it was good fun reading it. Why don't you say a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your condition and kind of what led you to write this book?
So I'm Bethany. I'm all the way from New Zealand. So I met Drew and his wife Kirsty at the university and ministry we had. And they really helped me through my faith. So I am in a wheelchair. I was diagnosed with my condition when I was 7 years old. So with that come heaps of challenges, and it's a big part of my reasoning for having started this book. I have quite a short lifespan. It's estimated by the doctors. So I was like, if I'm gonna write, I'm gonna write now. So and that was like the motivation to hurry up. But also I really want people to come to know God through my own story, because if my story is like a tiny part of God's story, that's a good thing. And I think it is. So that's kind of my reasoning in a nutshell.
Yeah, Bethany, you've been we used to always kind of refer to you as our little evangelist among the students, because you were always having conversations with people and always sharing your faith, and you have the unique blessing of having lots of people that support you. And so they kind of involuntarily are there with you doing different things. And so you just get to talk to them, and you get to talk to them about whatever. And you use that opportunity to talk about Jesus and what he's done for you, and life and death and sin and all that different stuff. And so it was really cool just hearing your stories and then being reminded of some of them here. Now, there is a really unique part of your story, which of course our channel is primarily focused in on soteriology, God's love and provision for everyone. It's antipode Calvinism, and part of your story, and I remember this early on, was in spite of sharing your faith regularly and a seemingly fruitful life, you struggled quite a bit with assurance of your faith, of kind of like, am I really saved? Have I really been born again? And that was like a challenge for you, as I recall. And I know you and my wife Kirsty had tons of conversations, and you and I had tons of conversations. I wanted to read this because I was revisiting your book as I was preparing for this interview, and I actually had this highlighted, but I guess it just didn't really hit me as seriously as I thought the first time. But so you say that, and this is in chapter 18 called Life and Death. And it says, I visited a Bible study with a friend. One of the leading members espoused a doctrine I had never heard before. He said God only wanted to save some. This flew in the face of everything I had been taught, no less the simple message of John 3:16, potentially the best known Bible verse of all. God loves the whole world so much that he sacrificed his life so that whoever trusts him will live eternally. The man who explained the alarming doctrine was intelligent and theologically insightful. He knew more than I did. Things simply must have been the way that he had said. I was terrified. Now I not only questioned whether I was saved, but I wondered if I could ever be. Perhaps salvation was something I should never hope to attain. And I'll skip down a little bit here as it mentions us. This is kind of like one of the sections where it mentions my wife and I, but you write this quote, I write about this here because it drove my anxiety like nothing else imaginable. From my perspective, it was the deepest valley of my struggle. From this place, I learned that an honest study of the truth will set a person free. Over the coming months and years, I became convinced that God wants all people to be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. It's interesting because in your book, you're kind of chronicling the struggle with assurance that you had. And then as you're struggling with this assurance, another doctrine comes in. And we did an episode where we talked about John MacArthur's answer to the question of, what if I'm not chosen? And we didn't think that that was a very good response, because that's really not a question that you should have to ask. But then you began asking this question, well, wait a second, what if I'm not chosen? And then that kind of just opened up a whole nother door, even a wound, dare I say, of like, well, maybe this isn't even possible for me. Do you want to talk a little bit about that experience and what that was like, what was challenging for you, maybe what helped you in that season?
That was like so damaging, because I was in such a vulnerable place of like coming to grips with believing God's promises apply to me. And then this guy who's really cool, I'm still friends with him, but he comes along and just tells me like, maybe you can be saved, not directly, but yeah. So, and then I was like, oh, everyone must believe this. This just must be the way it is. And so I was freaking out. I thought, oh, well, therefore Kirsty and Drew believe that as well. And eventually I got the nerve to talk to you guys about it, and you did not. So you really helped me through that. But also, one of the first verses Kirsty got me to memorize was from Ephesians. When you believed, you were sealed with the promised Holy Spirit as a guarantee. Like, it was already done, and I just had these feelings that kind of got in the way of believing that. So that was a hard time, and I say, like, I said, there is the deepest valley of my struggle. I mean, if you're reading the book, I had a lot of struggles up to that point, but that was the worst.
it's interesting as you're wrestling with this, you effectively encounter this position, this doctrine that can't even give you confidence that Christ loves you salvifically and laid down his life for you in such a way that he actually intends you to be saved, and there are some kind of theological nuance there that Calvinists would like to get into, but fundamental underneath this is that it's possible that some people have not been unconditionally chosen. And I do remember that being quite a challenge and a topic that kind of spread among our students, because we did have, we were kind of the the non-Calvinist provisionist group on campus, and then there was another group, and people of diverse opinions, but it was a hot topic among our students. So because it's something that Kirsty and I were quite passionate about, and it wasn't until the end of our time with the college ministry, with the university ministry, that I started doing this. I hope you don't mind me saying this, because it might be a question in a number of our viewers' minds that don't know you and stuff, and you cover this in your book, that when people meet you, they can kind of get the impression that you're not all there, or your brain isn't all there, but you're actually very smart and super great, especially at math. So you're very intelligent, and so this is coming from a woman who's wrestling with this theologically, not just emotionally, but theologically, and is not some kind of not understanding what's happening. I mean, you understood, and it was of concern to you. And on all of this, the question does come because we all have to answer these kinds of questions when it comes to suffering. And quite frankly, you chronicle quite a bit of suffering in your book, and I was unaware of this. I don't know whether or not you just hadn't talked about this much in your own personal journey. I know sort of the Kiwi tall poppy thing, you don't want to kind of stick your head out too much or say too much about certain things because you don't want to draw attention to yourself. But part of your condition involves quite a bit of pain and discomfort. So there is quite a bit of suffering in this journey, and you haven't always been in a wheelchair. Do you want to talk a little bit about your journey to where you are now and what that was like?
Yeah, so I grew up in kind of a normal Christian family in Taranaki, New Zealand. It's a very farm center, so I grew up with lots of cows on the farm. I was a pretty active little girl. I have 3 sisters. Yeah, just a normal life, I guess. And then when I was 7 and Lydia was 9, my older sister, she was showing a few more symptoms than me because she's older, and it deteriorates as you get older. And she was diagnosed with the condition. So there's a 1 in 4 chance per pregnancy when both the parents have the gene for this. It's called Friedrich's Ataxia, if any of you know what that is. We got 2 in 4. So me and my older sister and my younger 2 sisters don't have the condition. So yeah, I remember at that time, I thought as a 7-year-old that my dad was kind of overreacting, like it was fine, this was like a future thing, and I just wanted to enjoy my life as it was. But obviously he was dealing with quite a lot, and So was my mum handled it quite a bit better, I think. Really relying on God, and she was inspired a lot by Johnny Erickson, among others, but especially her journey. If people know about that, she was paralyzed at quite a young, like in her teens. Yeah, so more about that is in my book, but in general, it gets worse as I get older. So, yes, I do have a lot of pain. It's not like chronic pain, like all the time. It kind of comes and goes. So,
Yeah, I think you talk quite a bit about, stiffness and things like that were getting progressively difficult. And I remember when we very first met you and you were coming along to the university student group. Granted, I think that you were there like slightly before even we were officially there, because you were there when Peter was on staff, and then we came afterwards, didn't we? Because
yes.
from memory, he kind of introduced us to you and stuff, but you'd be there in the meeting and stuff, and you'd kind of sit up like that and stretch and stuff. And because you would get quite stiff and things. So
moving helps. Moving helps for me.
Yeah. So you've lived all your life with this condition, and it's kind of like a rapidly changing condition. It's degenerative. So there are things that you couldn't do that you could do previously and can't do now. For instance, you were doing, when we first met you at university, you were kind of back and forth, like walking around, exercising and stuff and doing that sort of thing. But as time has gone on, that's become more and more difficult, hasn't it?
So I still get up out of my chair, but I can't. Not the same at all. It's very supported now. It's not functional. I can't just walk around.
Right. Yeah. And it's it's interesting, this is quite a serious topic that we're talking about today, but Bethany actually has a really good sense of humor, and Bethany has a really dark sense of humor as well. And I read one story in this book that I remember you telling us about this, at least if I can recall correctly, or maybe it just sounded so familiar because of the people that were involved that it felt like I had heard the story before. But another student whose name is Ewan. Hi, Ewan, if you're watching this, I don't know. So all of you were piling into his car, and I think you guys might have been coming to one of our Bible studies or something, or just hanging out together. I can't remember what it was. And lots of people were were commenting on his beater of a car, because it's just this old rundown station wagon, and I don't even know if I think the radio worked in it, but it was just, you get in it and it's clearly is on its last leg. I don't know if he still has that car or not. If he does, then that car is a miracle. But and people were just constantly commenting. And he said at one stage, he said, "All right," he said, "All right, the next person that comments about my car, disparagingly or negatively or whatever, criticizes it, gets to walk home." And you're in the back seat, and you're like, "Really? Like, I get to walk home? That would be great." Like. And I thought it was so funny. It's just such a funny Bethany Ewan interaction, and just exemplifies your dark sense of humor. That amidst all of this, you joke still about your condition. I mean, I think there's one part in your book here where you talk about somebody was saying something to you, and you said something about how you were glued to your seat listening, as always. And I just thought that was a funny kind of quintessential dark Bethany humor inserted in there that I appreciated throughout. So I don't know if that will come through in people that don't know you that read this, but I thought it was really funny. I enjoyed that aspect of your book, the kind of dark humor inserted throughout. It was very you. On kind of the more serious note of things, do you want to talk a little bit more about, God's will for you? Was it God's will for you to be in a wheelchair? And maybe you can even talk about your wrestling with the topic of healing, because I know you talk about that a fair bit, sort of towards the middle end of the book as well. I'm sure people would love to hear your perspective, especially on this, because again, this is a question that we all have to answer, and especially as someone that's experienced it, people would love to hear from you.
I definitely don't believe it's God's will for me to be in a wheelchair. I believe He let that happen, and I really have no idea why He let that happen to me or to anyone. But I know they can use that for good, regardless of it being a bad situation. I have prayed like if I can bring more people to God by being in a wheelchair, like that's worth it, and I'm happy to be here. But I don't think that it was ever God's will, but He can bring that out of it, which is His will. So that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think so. I posted about this on X the other day, and I think a key word that we use when we're talking about these things is that God uses evil for a redemptive purpose or a redemptive good. Mm-hmm. So rather than that He causes or determines or plans. Now, do I think that He plans some things? Yes. Do I think that He has predestined everything? No. And I think that, quite frankly, we just don't know what He has planned and just merely allows. And we're left to speculate on that, What was that?
Exactly. Like, I'm reading Job at the moment, and like he's blaming God for stuff. He gets pretty mad at God. And like, I don't think I've ever done that, but if I do, God can take that. But
you mean He can take like you being mad at Him or whatever if you happen to,
like he'll forgive. But I try not to do that because, like you say, we don't. He knows better.
When you say that God uses it, we're intentionally theologically creating distance between God's agency and the evil. Yeah. And you're saying that He allowed it to happen and now He can use it for good. And I pointed out in this X post that whenever a Calvinist uses this language about, says, well, this evil happened and God can use it, like, well, what you really mean is that God planned it and predestined it. And now He's going to incorporate that element into His overall plan, which is having predestined everything in order to bring out a redemptive good. Yes, still, but that's different from saying that God uses it. So I often critique my Calvinistic brethren that when they use words like God uses, that you're actually borrowing from us free willers, from us libertarian free free will theists when you're talking like that. And so, yeah, I think that's a helpful nuance and helpful understanding. And I think one thing that I appreciated about your book too is that you're very raw with kind of your different struggles and wrestles. There's still a lot of joy and fun in your book as well, but you're very authentic, and you also don't, and maybe this is the Kiwi in you, you don't pretend to have all the answers. Just like, I've been through this. This is kind of my experience. This is where I'm landing. I'm still wrestling with this, but this is kind of the conclusion that I've come to. And it's not a particularly like pretty bow of like, I have all this figured out, yada, yada, yada. It's just very like, this is my journey and this is where I'm at. And I appreciated that about your book. I think that if I can, rant a little bit about Calvinism, one thing that I've kind of always said about it is that I find it to be too simple. Like, it sort of pretends to have an answer for everything, which is that God planned it. And I think a lot of us Christians do this, and there may be a number of our viewers that even disagree with me on this. But when something happens, they might say, "Oh, well, it's all part of God's plan," or I don't know. That's just kind of like a general catch-all. It's all part of God's plan, and we kind of comfort ourselves with these words. And I think the fact of the matter is that I don't see anywhere in the scriptures that it says that God has planned everything or predestined everything. I do see in scripture that he has planned certain calamities, evils, whatever, but I also don't think that entails him micromanaging it. And I think that also means that we don't really know what he plans and what he doesn't plan. And we just have to trust in first the good news of Jesus and just his character and who he is. And if I can read this other quote from this chapter where you talk about this, I'm just reminded. So you say, that I can now honestly say with a very thankful heart, God desires to save everyone, even myself. And then here you say, God's character is exactly represented in the sacrificial nature of Jesus Christ. I think that was quite impactful in terms of you ended up resting on who God revealed himself to be in Christ, and not necessarily like a particular belief set or a particular kind of check boxes that you had all figured out. It was just like, this is who Christ has revealed himself to be. He loves everyone. I'm trusting in this. And I thought that was simple and quite good. So now you mentioned in this book that, this was quite a deep, dark valley for you, or one of the, well, let me just let's quote you here. I write about this here because it drove my anxiety like nothing else imaginable. And you said, from my perspective, it was the deepest valley of my struggle. Do you want to talk about kind of why you didn't talk about this particular topic, being kind of soteriology and Calvinism, heaps more in your book? Or
So I touched on it in that chapter, I guess, and a bit. You can pick it up later on if you know what Calvinism is, but I wanted the book to be very accessible and interesting to all of my potential audience, which are Christians and non-Christians. Like, my atheist neighbor has read it. My aunties that aren't Christian. It's very, I'm hoping that people can read it who would not understand that. So it's also got quite a simplistic outline of the Calvinism part, like the word Calvinism is not mentioned
Sure.
because
Yeah.
that can be off-putting.
Yeah.
Maybe depending on the reader, but yeah, it's become quite clear to me since publishing the book that I've actually got quite like, I don't have a good voice at all, but like with the people I can reach, I have a big voice in that way because, like, yes, I can talk about it at church and stuff, but also like the disabled community here in Palmerston North and wider, and people that don't, that are not Christians, and it's quite mind-blowing how many people can be interested in this.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, definitely. Your book definitely appeals to a larger audience, like a broader audience, and getting into the nitty gritty of kind of Christian intramural doctrinal debates was going to be a little bit of what we call inside baseball. For those that don't know you, again, your heart really is about sharing Jesus with people and seeing people come to know Jesus. You've had people in and out of your flat in terms of roommates and flatmates that you're sharing with and talking to, and one of your flatmates who also has a disability features pretty prominently and towards the end of the book as well. And so it is really cool to just see your story, and especially your injection of the gospel throughout. Like, I really liked this one quote in here. You say, I'll try to find another quote that also came to mind here. So this is in chapter 19. And it says, quote, "We all fall short of the glory of God, are deserving of eternal spiritual death apart from him, and can be reconciled only by the victory won at the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead." One thing that I've been talking about on this channel a little bit and kind of exploring in my own reading is Christ's atonement and what is it, what isn't it. And I like the factory here. The fact here, I was looking at the word victory when I said fact, and it came out factory. I like the fact that you focus in on the victory won at the resurrection of Jesus Christ and not just his death. You know, I got in trouble on X the other day on social media because I said something like Christ's atonement was not finished on the cross, in the sense that Christ needed to be raised. He then needed to enter the heavenlies on our behalf and present himself as a sacrifice and present his blood, being victorious, triumphing over the grave as part of the whole picture. Like his death isn't the end all be all. In fact, if it's not for his resurrection and everything that follows after it, there is no atonement as we know it. And one other quote that I wanted to share from you here, and I know I'm talking a lot, but you also talk in your book about how after a while you get winded and stuff, and speaking can sometimes be difficult. So just think of this as a break as well for you to chime back in here in a bit. I don't remember exactly where you were in this section. This is in chapter 14. In Deutschland. So this is in Germany. Your trip to Germany. Quote, "The most spectacular buildings of all were the churches. Each boasted multiple steeples reaching into the sky. The outer walls were intricately carved with painstaking perfection. Windows of stained glass told of our Lord's sacrificial life, death, and resurrection. I wondered how many had stood here without understanding his gift." And so I thought I highlighted that because it just reflects your heart and just kind of how you're thinking about these things. You're an evangelist. I mean, I'm living in Europe now. You were in Europe, and you're thinking about, how many people don't understand the story, how many people come in here and see this and don't know that this is for them. And this closely ties to one of the main reasons why this channel exists, at least for me, is that I don't want anyone like yourself to, whether you're sharing the good news with somebody the first time who's on the outside, we should be able to firmly and convincingly tell them God loves you. He does not want you to perish. He sent his son to die for you and to raise again, to give you life and to give you victory, being like you, the person that you're talking to. And similarly with a believer such as yourself, when you're coming with these questions, I don't want people to question, am I chosen, because of something that they've been told that's actually not true, that God may or may not have chosen you for salvation. Anyways, I just wanted to highlight those two quotes, the one about the victory that Christ won, as well as the just your heart for seeing people come to faith, which if you're watching this, first of all, you should get a copy of the book. It's on Amazon. It's much easier for you Americans to get actually than any of our Kiwi viewers, because of Amazon and all that other different stuff, as far as I understand. Or maybe it's a little bit easier now, but at the time I ordered it, had it sent to my mom, and then she brought it here. So I got it from American Amazon. But check it out. Order the book.
New Zealand people, they should contact me. We can link my Facebook page below and just message me.
Sure, I can do that. So if you're a Kiwi, if you're a New Zealander and you're watching this, you can message Bethany directly and she'll suss you out. If you're in the US, you can order it on Amazon. It's easy for you. It's a chronological book. It takes you from beginning to now. Speaking of chronology, I mean, we've talked about I'm ADD. I want to finish my thought that I was saying earlier. What I was trying to say is support Bethany through purchasing her book, but also through praying that God will bless the book and bless her as she continues to reach out to people, because I know that's your heart. That's what you want to see happen. You could probably care less about how many books are sold, so far as people are actually coming to Christ through your efforts. And so support her in that way with your dollars and with your prayer. And I wanted to ask though, like, this is kind of in the middle of your journey, I guess, in terms of your maybe 2/3 of the way through in terms of where you are right now, learning about Calvinism during university. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your life has been like after university and some of the joys and changes and trials?
So, yeah, I have flatmates coming in and out, as Drew mentioned. The majority of them have not been Christians. At the moment, I live with a nominal Christian who doesn't go to church, an atheist, and a Hindu. So it's an opportunity, which is also very difficult to navigate. So you pray for that. In terms of my health, it's getting worse and worse, but I'm still here. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say about that.
Very good. Yeah, I think again, I'm interested to know feedback from you, viewer, if you happen to pick up Bethany's book and read it, as especially maybe as an American that isn't familiar with some of the Kiwi, New Zealand locations and people sort of mentioned in the story. But this ADD. Okay. If you're mentioning the story, I feel like this is happening to me increasingly, Maybe it's age. This is my last year of my 30s, Bethany. So I was talking about the book, how it's chronological. Wait, almost got it. Okay, I don't know whether or not this is going to splice in very well to what I was just saying, but one thing that, as someone that knows you, it was, and I think I said this earlier, it was interesting to hear kind of some of the behind the scenes. Again, our story is in this book a little bit, my wife and I and our daughter Phoebe. And there were things that happened to you in 2020 and just immediately afterwards, like a heart scare and stuff like that, that I was reading. And I was like, man, I feel like, I don't know if Bethany ever told us about this, or might not have had opportunity because of, everything that we were going through, or maybe we were just going through crazy stuff and just didn't really have time to process it. But suffice it to say that I'm sure that you would really appreciate everyone's prayers for your condition as it grows more and more challenging each day, as I understand it.
Maybe not each day, but it's slow progression.
Right.
But today it's harder than this day last year.
Right. Yeah. Other questions that I've missed or topics that you would like to cover? I'm trying to. I can show your photo. I forgot to show that in here. Is that something you'd like to talk about?
That was when I was 13. I had spinal surgery, and this is the X-ray. Drew Scott. So as you can see, my spine is not straight. It is quite straight now. It's got metal rods from top to bottom, but that was a big surgery I had to have in Wellington Hospital when I was 13. And that meant 10 weeks off school. That just brings light to when I said that my struggle with assurance and Calvinism was the biggest struggle I've had. That's compared to that as well. I guess when the stakes of heaven and hell are obviously really high, that is very scary. So
you could say that, the Calvinism doctrinal struggle was the most severe spiritual and emotional struggle, but that this struggle, being after you had this surgery, was the biggest and most painful. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, that would be the most painful physically. Probably. Yeah. Especially up to that point.
Yeah, because obviously we didn't know you then. We met you when you were probably maybe 19. I don't know if we knew you in year one, in your first year.
Probably, yeah. 19.
And so, you were a few years past that by that point, but reading it, you paint a vivid picture as far as what a challenge it was. I'm curious, so I want to ask, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit here in terms of the doctrinal thing, because that's of deep interest to me, obviously. What would you say was kind of like one of the biggest challenges that you faced as far as kind of passages that you were encountering? And then what was something that maybe, it might not have been one conversation or one passage, obviously, but just like one thing that sort of clicked into place as far as assurance and sort of putting this doctrinal question rest, at least as far as it can be. I know that oftentimes things like this can crop back up. But.
Yeah, and it did crop back up and down. But in Romans 9, where it talks about the vessels, like talking back to God, so I used to read that once I thought that Calvinism was false. I'd read that and be like, oh yeah, but you just have to ignore that Calvinism is false. But then, I mean, of course that didn't sit well with me. And then
Sorry, you said you kind of had to just convince yourself that Calvinism was false, but then it didn't sit well with you.
Yeah.
Were you?
It didn't sit well with me to just ignore that verse from Romans 9.
Right.
But then it was you that brought up the Jeremiah, I think, passage about the potter and the clay. And that really helped me to see about how to reconcile that problem in my mind. Yeah. The title of my book, by the way, is This Broken Vessel. I painted that jar myself and then we cracked it online. But this broken vessel is kind of a play on the biblical phrase, but also relating to Jeremiah being clay vessel, and well, all of us are broken vessels, but me physically as well. So.
Yeah, I think that the title to your book is quite compelling in terms of just your condition and what you've been through. And I had kind of wondered if there were some of the biblical parallels as far as the vessels and Jeremiah 18 and things like that. I remember covering Romans 9 on a handful of different occasions with youth students, and we would kind of always say, like, it's a little bit helpful to know the Old Testament context of what Paul's coming from here. What is he talking about? What is he referencing? Because we are New Testament focused Christians that don't really know a lot about the Old Testament background. And so whereas Paul's audience, their scriptures were the Old Testament, so the things that came to mind for them would be different than what comes to mind for us. And that's mainly because we're kind of ignorant of our Old Testament scriptures. Once that comes into focus, Romans 9 is much easier to reconcile with the rest of the biblical narrative. I mean, I think a lot of people, myself included, probably for years, because I read the Bible growing up, and I'm sure I had come across it before, but you read difficult things and you just kind of, as they say in New Zealand, you put it in the too hard basket and you just move on. It's like, well, I just don't want to think about this.
I guess that's what I was doing with those verses in Romans 9, just like ignoring them, thinking, oh, there must be some answer, but I can't deal with that right now.
Right.
Until I actually looked at the Old Testament properly.
Well, we were really glad to be of service to the Lord, hopefully through your season with that. And I remember many a conversation with Kirsty, because she would catch up with you, and then she would summarize to catch up with me, and then I would kind of have input or whatever, different things like, point her to this scripture or tell her about this and stuff. And so, and we had many conversations, the three of us as well, and obviously with all the students. And so it was very much a team activity, and we learned heaps, and we're really encouraged by you and just your evangelistic efforts there with the students. And as you've already said, I mean, you've got one nominal Christian, but at minimum 2 non-Christians in your flat right now, that you're having conversations with. And it's interesting because knowing you, if I can speak a little bit on your behalf, as a result of your condition in New Zealand, there's kind of, tell me if I get any of this wrong, there's 2 different ways to manage it. You can kind of like outsource it to one of the organizations like they have there in town in Palmy, and then they kind of coordinate it for you and send help and stuff. Or you can kind of receive your own funding and allocate it and sort of be selective and stuff. Is that a correct summary, you would say, of how it's managed?
Yeah, so you mean for caregiving?
Right.
To help me out with like everything. Yeah, so I have done both, but largely organizing it myself. So I
was just going to say the reason why I highlight that is because God, in his providence and in using your condition for the redemptive good, you have opportunity to select both caregivers, that are in your sphere of influence and seeing you a lot, that you're having conversations with. Many over the years, granted, have been Christians and have been a mutual encouragement to you. Mm-hmm. But then you're also engaging with a lot of unbelievers in that way, people that don't know Christ yet. And then your flatmates as well. I mean, you've been very intentional about using what you have in front of you to share the good news of Jesus for people. And I think that can be a real encouragement to us all, just in terms of taking advantage and being proactive with what's in front of us and having those conversations and things. And courage, I think, if there, you may not feel this way, Bethany, but I think when I think about you, I think about courage, and that you just have conversations with people, and after reading this book, I'm like, man, Bethany she never complains. Like, I never heard her, say one cross word about all this. And there's so many different stories that she could just kind of complain about and wallow in. And I know that it has been a challenge for you, but I guess I just wanted to be of encouragement and say that I think that generally you're a very silver lining type of person. At least, I think that I enjoy doing this, so I smile a lot and things like that, but I'm not like a naturally, Bethany, would you say like I'm a naturally like chipper type person, or am I more like serious, or am I somewhere in the middle?
I'd say you're in the middle.
Okay. That's a very politically correct thing to say. Well, I guess I would just say, I just feel like if I had experienced half of what you experienced, then I feel like I would be a lot more negative, because I'm just kind of like a little bit more of a negative, critical type person. But I'm, viewer, pray for me. But anyways, that's an aside. It's not about me. But do you have any closing thoughts or any encouragement to our viewers?
Also, we can link my Facebook page for any New Zealanders, but anyone overseas in the States or Australia or Canada or anywhere, we can link the Amazon page. I've also got an ebook now.
Cool.
Buy it for all your friends for Christmas.
Yeah. I think I just noticed before hopping on that it's available for free if you have a subscription to Kindle Unlimited.
So yes, for a limited time, I think, like
okay,
3 months.
So if you're already on Kindle Unlimited, get it and read it. It won't take you long. I was real motivated to read it because I was curious to see what kind of terrible things Bethany had written about us. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, check out the book. I will put the link to that in the description, and I'll also put the link to Bethany's Facebook page so that you can just message her directly if you're outside the States or you just want to send her a word of encouragement or whatever. So thank you for coming on with me, Bethany. It's a pleasure to have you. Add you to the list of the revisionist authors that we've had on the channel.
Thank you for hearing me.
Available everywhere. The Broken Vessel autobiography by Bethany Wilson.